But right now, Stephen Moore is back with us. He is an economist, the editorial board member, and senior economics writer with the Wall Street Journal. You can find his blogs over at topics.wsj.com. Do I have that right, Stephen?
You got it.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
You wrote, "Is Keynes finally dead?" And you did quote him as saying, ultimately we are all, what would he say? Ultimately we're all dead? What was
In the long run, we're all dead.
In the long run, we're all dead, yeah. And I thought that was an accurate quote, but I was surprised that when you started, in your attack of Keynesian economics in the 1930s, that instead of choosing 1920, for example, 1936, you chose 1939, which is when he had, after 2 years of pressure from the Republicans, stopped Keynesian stimulus, and the unemployment rate had gone up from the 16.9% it was in 1936, which, by the way, if we were still calculating unemployment the way we did then, now, our unemployment rate would be 16.1%. So we were basically right there. And it went back up. Why?
Well, if you look over that whole period from the Depression started obviously in 1929. Roosevelt took office in 1933. The unemployment rate during Roosevelt's whole presidency until 1941, when World War II started, was above 10%. So there was no time when there was any respite from. There were slight, variations in the unemployment rate, but it was still by far the worst decade in 100 years for unemployment. And my point was that I don't think any of those programs, if you just look at the evidence, that there was any evidence that all the spending actually created jobs or created a recovery.
Well, we went in 1932. The unemployment rate was 23.6%. Right. 34, it was down to 21%. By 36, it was down to 16%. That's a pretty massive shift.
That's horrible. I mean,
it's horrible in the context of every 80-year Great Depression event. But
but I guess my point is this is the problem I have with people saying now we're in a Great Depression. The reason the Depression lasted so long was because every policy out of Washington was exactly the wrong thing to do. Just like right now, the reason this recession has been so horrible, and I was listening to your numbers on, how the incomes of families have actually gone down more in the quote recovery than during the recession itself. I mean, that's an indictment of the fact that we've done all of these policies that have really ruined the economy.
But we're not pursuing Keynesian economics right now.
Sure we are. We're running $1.5 trillion deficit.
The deficit spending is only a small part of Keynesian economics, and it's only if it's necessary to fund it. The point of that's just like, where do you get the money if you have to get the money? The fact of the matter is that if you want to say that, then you'd have to say Reagan was a Keynesian, because he took us from basically a flatline debt that we'd had since George Washington. It hadn't bumped when you adjusted for real inflation outside of a couple of world wars through 200 years, and tripled it. And then George Herbert Walker Bush, who added another couple billion to it. And then George W. Bush, who added another $5 billion to it. Are they Keynesians?
Yeah, look, there's no question there was a Keynesian element to the Reagan expansion, but the main...
So then you're acknowledging Keynesian economics.
The main impetus for the expansion in the 80s wasn't a Keynesian deficit. It was the marginal tax rate reductions, which is why what the Senate is going to vote on tomorrow is so silly. They're going to vote to raise tax rates, which is put us in a...
Well, to the extent that Reagan lowered taxes on working people, and he did once, he raised them then 7 times. But
the taxes were much lower. I mean, that was the biggest tax cut in history.
But that's Keynesian too. Yeah, but let me just ask you a really simple question, Stephen. What got us out of the Great Depression?
Okay, here's the thing.
What got us out of the Great Depression?
Let me answer this question about the Reagan deficits. Those deficits were half as large as the deficits that Obama is running. Reagan's average deficits were 4% of GDP. Obama's running
because Reagan didn't have 30 years of right-wingers before him, creating a situation where he had to shoot Santa Claus. I understand that, Stephen. But what do you think got us out of the Great Depression?
What got us out of the Great Depression?
Right.
It wasn't until World War II started that we got
so World War II got us out of the Great Depression, right?
Yeah, because you put 3 million people in uniform.
Okay, so that sounds to me like the biggest government spending program ever.
Oh, but
it sounds to me like you're proving Keynes.
There's no question people act completely differently. The whole economy adjusts to a wartime economy during the 1940s. So the normal economic rules are thrown out when you've got an enemy at your gates, people will act patriotically. They will pay 95% tax rate.
So what you're saying? Well, the 95% tax rate was actually put into place by Herbert Hoover. You'll recall.
No, well, I don't know, but
before Franklin Roosevelt came along.
Hardly a vindication of Keynesianism to say that World War II got us out of the Great Depression.
I think it's an absolute vindication of it.
I mean,
and think how much look at how much federal spending increased as a consequence of World War II.
Hugely up, but that's because everybody mobilized. Every citizen.
It put everybody to work
for a great war.
Right. You're explaining Keynes's theory. Keynes said if you hire one guy to dig a hole and another guy to fill it, then at the end of the day, what's going to happen?
People act completely differently during a period of wartime than they do during peace.
No, they don't.
People aren't going to pay 90% tax rates during a period of peace. People will act incredibly.
Then why was it that during the greatest expansion in the history of this country, during the 1950s, when Republican Dwight Eisenhower was president, or during the 1960s, when you had Nixon and in the 70s, why was it that during those 3 decades, the 3 decades of the largest decade-by-decade GDP expansion, literally since George Washington, every single one was over 3.1%. During those 3 decades, the top marginal tax rate was either 95% or 74%.
Well, wait a minute. First of all, the 70s was the worst decade for family incomes over the last. If you look,
I'm talking about GDP expansion. I'm talking about the economy overall.
What people really care about is their incomes. Incomes crashed during the 70s, and so did asset prices fell. I mean, people got
incomes began to flatten out in 1978, and you had the Arab oil boycott. The cost of energy shot up massively, and the bill for the Vietnam War became due.
God forbid, Tom, that we return to the 1970s.
But Stephen,
that was a horrible decade.
We're going to. We're going to, because we're doing the exact same thing right now with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, Bush's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, that we did with Johnson and Nixon's wars in Vietnam. They were put on the credit card, and they're going to have to be paid.
Right. I mean,
and when they have to be paid, you're going to have inflation, and you're going to have unemployment.
And the problem we made in the 60s, and we're repeating that mistake now, is that when you have to spend more money on guns, you spend less money on butter. And it's interesting, when you talked about the 1940s, look at what happened to all those government domestic programs in the 1940s. They all were totally eviscerated. I mean, they were
dialed back to the extent.
Every single penny was spent on the war effort.
Not true, Stephen. Not true at all.
Yeah, all those government programs went away.
They shrank because their labor force was sent overseas.
Yeah, because exactly. So
but the government was spending more money. If just for a second, and we have less than a minute, but just a very very simple question: if we had taken all that money that we spent on World War II, and instead of using it to drop bombs on Dresden, we had used it to build schools and roads, do you think that would have gotten us out of World War II or out of the Great Depression?
No, because we tried that. That's what Roosevelt had tried from 1932 to 1940.
So it wasn't the spending; it was somehow killing people gets us out of depressions.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. If the government spends $1, it has to come from somewhere.
And it only gets us out of depressions if it involves killing people.
If we're under attack and you mobilize for a whole-out military effort, people will work 70 hours a week. They will pay 95% tax rates. They'll do anything.
So the solution is to declare another war?
That's your solution.